January 28, 1944, 26,000 feet above the smoking heart of the Third Reich, Berlin. The air at this altitude is a crystalline, killing cold of minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside the cockpit of his Focke-Wulf FW-190, Major Hermann Graf feels only the heat of the hunt. His breath fogs slightly before his face, his eyes, sharp and narrowed, scanning the chaos unfolding around him. This is not the clean, chivalrous duel of fighter versus fighter he knew on the Eastern Front. This is a brutal, industrial slaughterhouse. The sky is a cacophony of violence, a crisscrossing tapestry of black and white flak bursts that jolt the aircraft like a fist, and the relentless gleaming trails of .50 caliber bullets from the American bomber boxes. Ahead, he fixes his gaze on his target, a Boeing B-17G flying fortress, lagging slightly from its combat box formation. Its olive-drab fuselage is already scarred, a long, jagged tear visible along the port side of its tail. This is the moment. He pushes the throttle, the BMW 801 radial engine roaring in response, and begins his attack run. The textbook approach for a Luftwaffe ace, head-on, a terrifying joust at a combined closing speed of over 500 miles per hour, targeting the cockpit and the pilots, the brain of the beast. You see the fortress grow in his windscreen with terrifying speed. You can almost make out the glint of the pilot's goggles, the frantic movement in the greenhouse nose. Graf's thumb rests on the cannon trigger. His FW-190 is armed with a pair of 13mm machine guns and, more devastatingly, two 20mm MG-151-20 cannons. A 2-second burst from these can shred the wing off a Soviet fighter. He knows this. He expects it. He closes to within 400 meters, ignoring the tracers beginning to reach for him from the B-17's chin turret. He fires. A brilliant flash of 20mm shells streaks across the sky. He sees strikes. A spiderweb of cracks erupts across the bomber's plexiglass nose, pieces of metal spinning away from the fuselage just behind the cockpit. He holds the burst for a critical second longer, then breaks away, diving beneath the formation to avoid the defensive crossfire. He rolls his aircraft, looking back over his shoulder to witness the kill. This is where the fortress should disintegrate, its fuel tanks erupting into a fireball, or its nose section tearing away, sending the 10-man crew tumbling into the void. But it doesn't. The B-17 shudders violently from the impact, like a great beast shaking off a blow. Smoke pours from the No. 2 engine, and a gaping, jagged hole is now visible just behind the cockpit. But it remains airborne. It doesn't spin out of control. It doesn't explode. It simply keeps flying. Graf can see the damaged propeller on the No. 2 engine feathered, a standard procedure to reduce drag, and the bomber, though wounded, is stubbornly holding its place in the formation. A cold, unsettling disbelief begins to creep into his gut, replacing the confident certainty of the kill. That should have been enough. It should have been enough. The disbelief that curdles in Major Graf's stomach is a sentiment echoed in technical debriefings across Germany. While pilots grapple with it in the air, engineers on the ground are confronting the same unnerving reality in hangars and offices, studying gun camera footage and damaged wrecks. They are trying to solve the riddle of the Phantom, the bomber that wouldn't die. Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, a young but brilliant aeronautical engineer reassigned from jet propulsion projects, stares at a series of grainy black-and-white photographs. They are stills from Graf's own gun camera, showing the direct hits on the B-17. He then looks at intelligence reports, interrogations of captured crewmen, and detailed diagrams painstakingly recreated from wreckage. The answer is there, and it is profoundly disturbing. It isn't magic. It is a cold, calculated philosophy of design that the Americans have perfected. It is the concept of redundancy and resilience. Think of it from Richter's perspective. You design a fighter like the FW-190 or the Bf-109. It is a masterpiece of minimalism, a lightweight, agile killer. Every component is essential. There is little room for excess. A single 20-millimeter hit in the right place, a coolant line, the engine block, the single spar of a wing, is usually a death sentence. It is a scalpel. The B-17, he realizes, is not a scalpel. It is a sledgehammer wrapped in armor. He points to the diagrams for his superior, a gray-haired colonel from the Luftwaffe High Command. "Look here, Herr Oberst," Richter says, his finger tracing the lines of the B-17's wing. "The fuel tanks, they are not simple rubber bladders. They are layered. The inner layer is a special, raw rubber compound. When a round punctures it, aviation fuel leaks out, but it also causes the rubber to swell, to plug the hole itself. It's self-sealing." The colonel scoffs, but Richter persists. "And the crew positions, the pilot, co-pilot, navigator, they sit behind slabs of armor plate, not just thin sheets, but hardened steel. Our 20-millimeter cannon shells are devastating, but they are designed to fragment upon impact with armor. To destroy a B-17, you must hit the critical system directly, and they have made that exceedingly difficult." This is the core of the German frustration. They are facing an aircraft built around its crew's survival. The four engines, while vulnerable, are separated. Losing one, even two, is not automatically fatal. The control cables are duplicated, running through separate parts of the airframe. A single cannon shell cannot sever them all. The structure is robust, overbuilt by German standards, able to absorb tremendous punishment and retain its basic aerodynamic shape. For every weakness a German engineer identifies, the American design seems to have a pre-planned countermeasure. It is a flying testament to American industrial might and a pragmatic, stubborn refusal to die. Inside the wounded B-17 that Major Graf had just assaulted, the world is a shriek of wind and a testament to human endurance. The aircraft, nicknamed the Bad Penny by its crew, is living up to its name. It keeps coming back. The initial, concussive slam of the 20-millimeter shells has passed, replaced by the deafening, steady roar of air tearing through the gaping hole in the fuselage just behind the cockpit. The temperature, already Arctic, plummets further. Snow whirlwinds of shredded insulation and paper maps fill the cramped space. First Lieutenant Jack Sullivan, the pilot, muscles the control column, his leather-gloved hands gripping tight. The plane flies with a heavy, wounded animal list, the loss of the No. 2 engine creating a constant, dragging pull to the left. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Miller, is already working the engine controls, feathering the dead propeller, adjusting power on the remaining 3 right cyclones to compensate. "She's heavy, Jack, but she's holding," Miller yells over the interphone, his voice strained but controlled. You move through this metal tunnel of chaos. Behind the pilots, the navigator's compartment is a wreck of splintered plexiglass and twisted metal. The chart table gone. The navigator himself is unhurt, miraculously, now huddled on the floor, his oxygen mask firmly on his face. Further back, in the radio room, the radio operator is trying to raise the formation, his equipment sparking and flickering from severed wires that whip in the slipstream. The smell is a nauseating cocktail of high-octane fuel vapor, spent cordite, and the coppery tang of fear. In the waist, where the gunners stand by their 50-caliber machine guns, the hole is largest. You can see clear through to the other side of the aircraft, a window to the endless hostile sky over Germany. The gunners, Staff Sergeant Petrovsky and Jones, are secured by their safety harnesses, their faces pale, their parkas crusted with frost from their own breath. They stare at the devastation, at the flak and fighters still menacing the formation outside, and then they look at each other. A nod passes between them. They are still flying. The fortress is still in the air. That is all that matters. For over 3 hours, this battered machine, this collection of punctured steel and resilient human spirit will drone westward, a bleeding whale escaping a school of sharks, each mile a victory wrested from the very jaws of the Reich. A week after the raid, the stark evidence of the fortress's defiance is laid bare on the cold, concrete floor of a hangar far from the prying eyes of the common soldier. This is where the remains of a different B-17, finally downed by a massive flak burst that severed its tail, have been brought for analysis. Major Hermann Graf, still haunted by the memory of the bomber that got away, stands beside Oberleutnant Richter. The engineer is no longer looking at photographs. He is walking through the carcass of the beast itself. The scene is one of brutal dissection. The aircraft is splayed open, its skin peeled back by German technicians like pathologists performing an autopsy. Graf runs a hand along the edge of the armored plate behind the pilot's seat. It is thick, studded with the flattened, lead-smeared impacts of 20-millimeter cannon shrapnel that failed to penetrate. "This alone," Graf mutters, "would have saved the crew from my attack." Richter nods, pointing to the wing route. "And look here, Major, the main spar. It is a continuous beam, a single massive forging. Our intelligence suggested it was built in sections. They were wrong. To break the wing, you must break this bridge girder. It is almost inconceivably strong." They move to the self-sealing fuel tanks which have been cut from the wings. Richter picks up a section, showing Graf the inner, rubberized layer. He demonstrates with a screwdriver, puncturing the material. A thick, black, tar-like substance immediately begins to well up, swelling and closing the gash within minutes. "It is not a perfect system," Richter admits. "A sustained fire can overcome it, but for a single pass from a fighter, it is maddeningly effective. They are not just building an aircraft, Major. They are building a system. Armor to protect the crew, self-sealing tanks to protect the flight, redundant controls to protect the flight. The airframe itself is the final layer of protection." Graf is silent for a long time, his earlier frustration now tempered by a cold, professional awe. He thinks of the men inside the bad penny, flying a machine that was, by all rights, a flying wreck. He thinks of the sheer, bloody-minded determination required by the Americans to design something this resilient. This was not the finesse of a master craftsman. This was the overwhelming brute force logic of a nation that could outproduce, outdesign, and outlast its enemies. The fortress was more than a bomber. It was a statement. And standing there in the cold hangar, surrounded by the evidence of its incredible durability, Hermann Graf, one of the Reich's most feared aces, understood that statement perfectly. He was not just looking at a machine, he was looking at the unyielding face of American industrial power, and it filled him with a profound sense of foreboding. The foreboding that settled in Graf's gut in the Jüterbog hangar becomes a widespread, chilling reality in the weeks that follow. The dissection of the downed fortress provided answers, but no solace. For every one B-17 that fell in a fiery, satisfying arc, 2 more seemed to limp home, their crews living to fight another day, their bomb bays destined to be filled again. The psychological impact of this is corrosive. For the Luftwaffe pilots, it transforms a tactical problem into an existential one. You can see it in the debriefing rooms after missions. A young lieutenant, his flight suit still smelling of cordite and sweat, slams his fist on a table. "I hit him! I saw the strikes all along the cockpit! I know I did!" The intelligence officer nods, weary. They have heard this all before. The gun camera footage is reviewed, showing the unmistakable flashes of impact and the subsequent infuriating shot of the B-17 steadying itself and holding formation. The initial aggressive confidence of the Jagdflieger begins to erode, replaced by a desperate, almost frenzied aggression. They start taking greater risks, pressing their attacks closer, flying deeper into the deadly web of the American .50 caliber crossfire, the Wehrmacht Polk, or 4-engine swarm, in an attempt to achieve the perfect, killing shot. And in doing so, more of them die. On the ground, the engineers like Richter are ordered to find a solution, a silver bullet. They experiment with heavier 30mm cannons like the Mk-108, a crude short-barreled weapon dubbed the pneumatic hammer for its thumping report. Its massive mine-shell explosive charge can indeed tear a wing from a fortress, but its low muzzle velocity and looping trajectory force the fighters to come dangerously close. They develop underwing rocket launchers, the Werfer Granate 21, firing 21-centimeter mortar shells into the bomber formations from a distance. These can break up the tight combat boxes, but they are inaccurate, an area weapon of terror rather than a precise tool of destruction. None of it is enough. The problem is not a lack of German ingenuity or courage. The problem is the fundamental nature of the opponent. The B-17 is not a singular technological marvel to be countered. It is a manifestation of a relentless, replicating force. The true horror dawning on men like Graf and Richter is that they are not fighting just one tough airplane. They are fighting an idea, the idea that machines and the men within them could be made to survive. And as the contrails over Berlin multiply, as the bomb craters pockmark the cities of the Reich, it becomes terrifyingly clear that this unkillable idea is rolling off production lines in Seattle and Los Angeles at a rate the Reich cannot hope to match. The fortresses are not just durable, they are seemingly endless. And against that combination, skill and valor alone were beginning to look tragically insufficient.